Welcome to another episode of Graceful Curiosity. I'm Henry.
I'm Michael.
Michael, we're in our cozy season. We have skipped past fall. We're gone right into winter, at least Texas winter.
Mm-hmm.
So that means it's time for lounge pants, sweats, you name it.
There you go. Exactly. Anything that just makes you feel nice and comfortable.
Yeah. But also, with that, it's just perfect timing because we are now in Advent as well. For us, at least in the liturgical world, that's a big deal. Not so much in the non-liturgical world, but, you know, not everyone's perfect, Michael.
That's right. We all have our flaws, right?
But, yeah, I don't know if you've noticed Christmas decorations are up all over the place. All the sales, all the explosion of just when you go to the grocery store or, you know, Walmart or wherever it is, it's just all up in your face. So you can't miss it this time of year.
That's right.
So we truly know we're in Advent. That makes me think, do we need to get like a little decoration for our set?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we could...
Maybe get some garland and get going there? Is this something like that?
Yeah.
You know, just for the season. Who knows?
Well,
And it'll be there till Epiphany, like,
That's
you know,
right.
like good Christians do.
We observe the full 12 days of Christmas.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
I think Epiphany may be on a Wednesday this year. No, Christmas Eve's on a Wednesday, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so I'm doing math. This is not, as we've said before, this is not a math podcast.
Right, exactly.
I think it might be like on a Monday. If because 14. Okay, never mind. We're just gonna.
We'll look it up later.
It'll be interesting. But speaking of Advent, we do want to plug something real quick, and that is Journey to Bethlehem. It's a devotional we do at Grace. I think we're almost out. I think we're out of hard copies at the church, but we shoot it daily on the email. And we also have a link to like the full PDF. You can just throw a comment down below if you want it. We'll totally, and I'll send you the link. So all you gotta do is comment below if that's something you want. But what's cool about it is Michael and I are both writers on this.
Indeed.
So we won't tell you what day we're doing. That's kind of the fun part. That's kind of what I do. I forget and don't look back at the email. And then it becomes a game of guessing who wrote what.
Right.
As we go through. Just like a fun little exercise, right?
It is.
Because, you know, at this point, we've been doing this since the inception of the church. And, you know, it's kind of, I've kind of gotten to know the people that have written for years and kind of know their voice. Like I know a Bob Devo when I see one, when I read one, you know, for example, or I know a Rita one as well, you know, so sometimes I do forget the ones I write. I'm like, this is really good. Who wrote this? And I'm like, oh, I wrote this.
That's great.
Or I'll say, this one really sucked. There's like no point to this. Oh, I wrote this one too. So, you know, those different kinds of feelings. But it is, I think there's 10 authors this year who put this together. So I hope it blesses you and it's something you enjoy. So go check it out. Yeah. So... But with that, we'll get through the housekeeping, right, Michael? So, every Wednesday, 12 o'clock, you can catch us. New episode. We're not going to miss a day. Even through the Christmas season, we're not missing a day. It may be pre-recorded, but, you know, we will not miss a day at all. It will come your way, so don't worry about that. We'd love to be a part of your holiday tradition. But with that, you can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Audible, and iHeartRadio. For us, it doesn't matter. Use whatever is most convenient to you. We just appreciate likes, subscribing, and you know, comments or reviews. It all helps. A lot of these services just like engagement. So engagement pushes us forward and causes us, you know, to you know, be able to find more people. And maybe if you do a review, we'll read it out on this podcast. I know I don't know if you know, some of your podcasts you listen to, they'll read out reviews
Definitely.
of people that have wrote reviews. So if you want your own shout out on Graceful Curiosity, there's a way to go. So with that, Michael, we are continuing our Heaven and Hell series, which is only week 2, so we're not too deep in.
No, not yet.
But if you haven't catch it, last week's episode was on misconceptions of heaven and hell, because there's been a lot of influence by other religion, by pop culture, everything in between on what people think heaven and hell is.
Yeah.
So,
books, movies, music, video games, everything.
Even Christian fiction like Left Behind.
Yes, indeed.
Not, it's your choice. You can choose whether you like the Nicolas Cage one or not. But today we're going to be talking about, because I feel like we can't talk about heaven and hell itself before we talk about what gets us to the places of choice.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. What determines our eternity? And I think it's only fair, Michael, to look at least from a Christian worldview perspective and a biblical perspective, the things that don't and why they don't. So, I looking at other faiths, we're not trying to. I think we're going to try to do it respectfully. I hope.
Certainly.
But sometimes, you just got to share truth, as they say.
Right. Because, kind of contrary to the spirit of, contemporary culture, there really are serious and major distinctions, right, between all the belief systems that are out there in the marketplace of ideas. And we really do a disservice to other faiths by trying to paper over the differences, right? It's more faithful to the actual teachings of this, sort of diverse array of belief systems that we have out there if we actually accentuate the differences between them, and especially the differences between the Christian faith and the other world religions.
Yeah. And we're not going to go, deep into the beliefs of these. We're more focusing on what's the salvific part of it.
Exactly. Yes.
So, of course, we're going to start first because we'll save the Abrahamic religions for last. But first, 2 of the largest religions outside of Christianity, and one of them being what's thought to be the oldest one on record. So we have the Hindu and Buddhist faith, which I put them together because they're very similar in their kind of salvific parts. They both believe in the system of karma. Right? You do good deeds, it builds you up, or it makes you go up levels. If you do bad things, it brings you down, and you get what's coming to you, right? And they also both have this idea of reincarnation. So, really, there's no heaven and hell per se. It's about your next life being set up for greater success. I know at least for Buddhism, there is Shangri-La, this peak of enlightenment. But even that is in the sense of living, and then you die, and then reincarnation. So, why is this false?
Yeah, well, it follows this sort of model that I think is basically sort of the default human understanding of what salvation would be like, or how one would attain salvation, right? Which is, it's basically just sort of a projection onto salvation or the afterlife of sort of how we make it by in this life, right? So it essentially is what, to use the terminology, right, of Christian theological reflection, is a works-based view of salvation, in the sense that our eternal destiny is determined by completely and totally, not by the mercy and grace of a supreme being, but by how much we are able to sort of work our way up this ladder of morality or virtue. And in the specific case of Hinduism and Buddhism, right, it's to try to, as you said, prepare yourself, secure for yourself a superior station in your next life.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's sort of this continuation of this cycle of working your way up this spiritual hierarchy,
Yeah.
if you want to call it that,
Yeah,
right?
we're just trying to get to the next level. It's like kind of like a video game almost. Like we're you know, whether it's, you know, think of Pokemon, you're evolving to your next stage, right? Or, you know, it's an RPG where you're trying to get better and better.
Yeah.
So it's kind of how it is.
Yeah, and I mean, and you know, as we said, it's a very human-centric, right, anthropocentric understanding of how one might attain salvation. And so from a self-consciously Christian perspective, right, this in many ways puts one's eternal destiny in their own hands, right, which is extremely problematic, right, from a biblical perspective that sees every part of human life being in the hands of God rather than in our own.
Yeah, and this is also a great segue into why you guys, you know, us as Christians shouldn't speak of karma or like he's getting what's coming. You know, it's like, because it's a very unbiblical concept that automatically what's, you know, what you do when you do good, automatically you get good coming to you, or if you do bad, you know, bad's always going to come to you. Because I think we've talked about before that just because of sin, this world is topsy-turvy. Someone can be doing so much good, but then all of a sudden, you know, a lot of suffering comes their way, and then it creates this cycle. I think we've talked about this specifically with the prosperity gospel.
Exactly.
Where it's like
exactly
this
right.
system of like, I must be doing something wrong. It creates this idea of like God's punishing you, when really that's not how this world works. It is not a karma-based system. That's not how this world works.
Exactly.
So just adding on from a Christian perspective, I don't think we should feed into the narrative of karma, even using it as a pop culture reference, right? Because it's practically part of the pop culture vernacular at this point.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And just to sort of expand on that idea real quickly, you know, because we see that, and even as Scripture tells us, right, we can see in this world that in many cases the wicked, the morally corrupt, prosper, right?
Yeah.
And so this karmic view of morality then could lead you to believe, right, that all those who are prosperous are righteous, when in fact we know that that is not the case, and in many, if not most cases, it's the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
So this sort of karmic view can really distort our understanding of morality.
Yeah. So it's just a good thing to think about, at the very least, for food for thought there today.
Exactly.
So the next is paganism, which is probably the most wide range. I mean, this can be from like you studying Roman gods in history class in like elementary or junior high, to just the focus on the nature. I think that's more prominent with paganism today, is like the Mother Earth,
Right.
you know, or the Earth Goddess, or something of that nature, or like God lives everywhere kind of mentality. And what makes this different than normal works based, I would say, is kind of you're doing the works more out of control and appeasement.
Yes, exactly.
Like you're making sacrifices to who you think God is or gods are, to kind of control what they'll do to you, or appease them so they don't do things to you. So it's all about this control system in place to kind of make sure you have the best outcome ever.
Right. I think that's exactly right. Appeasement being the key term there, right? It really sort of, I think in a lot of ways, approaches the gods or God, whatever the sort of system is. It approaches them as sort of like this, you know, cosmic boss type figure, right? Where you have to be on their good side in order to get the benefits that they might be able to confer to you, right? So, in a lot of ways, I view it as sort of a way of trying to manipulate, you know, the spiritual forces or whatever entity you think is capable of blessing you, giving you long life and good health and prosperity and all these basic things, it's a way of trying to manipulate that in order to conform to your personal needs and desires.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of putting it. You know, so but there's like a million different flavors of paganism.
Yes.
So things can be just about everywhere. So then we wanted to get into more the Abrahamic religions, and when we use that word, it means like Abraham's a central figure in kind of the lineage of Abraham. So this more, of course, can be Islam. And it can also be, you know, the Jews, but it can also be the Mormons as well. So it's about that lineage through Abraham and how they view God's promise to Abraham and how that's facilitated through history. So first looking at Islam, which is a completely works-based faith where you have to achieve the 5 pillars. I should have written the 5 pillars down, but that's okay. I know one of them is going to Mecca. One of them is about good works. One of them is about memorization. You know, all these things to kind of you have to achieve these 5 things to go to heaven, which then kind of subverts. This is just enough, instead of like always being good or always. Which I know some Muslims might argue that against that because, you know, they're in their perspective, they're always supposed to be subservient to God or Allah. But it creates this, like, set goal of bare minimum. Like, you know the goal.
Right. So. Yeah, and just to elaborate on that, you know, that's, again, a kind of more formalized sort of rendition of these kind of human-based systems of thinking. And so in the case of Islam and even forms of, you know, Orthodox Judaism, as we'll talk about it later, there's this conception that keeping the commandments, keeping the decrees of God is what sort of merits one's salvation, right? If you do these things, X, Y, or Z, you become worthy, right, to be to spend eternity in the presence of God. And so again, that's sort of this reflection of a kind of religious system in which the notion of pure grace and mercy being poured out to undeserved sinners is foreign, is alien, right, to these sorts of systems. And because of that, I think we can see in sort of divergent forms of Islam take this to an extreme, right? They kind of work this out to this position where if then we earn our favor with God, if we earn our right to spend eternity in paradise, then we can sort of force our way. We can take radical actions to do that, right? And that includes things like, you know, what we are familiar with in, you know, recent history. You know, it can be violence. It can include violence, right? As a way of...
the idea of jihad.
Exactly. So, you know, these ideas about salvation, soteriology, have practical, real-world consequences, right? And so we can see that in this notion of the Islamic view of salvation.
Yeah. Which then gets us to Judaism, which I think is it's similar but different. Because, like, if Islam is very focused, like, here are the things, do these exact things, you're good to go. But with the broadness of Judaism and the system of sacrifice and cleansing, it's like you don't really know how many times am I supposed to sacrifice to get, you know, can I break so many laws? Because especially with Judaism, what is 613?
Yep.
You know, can I break Loki? Sit. Like, He's on house arrest today, so he's not allowed to go outside, but it doesn't help there's a window right there and he sees squirrels.
Right.
So we apologize for that. But with Judaism, it's so broad in a sense that, like how, and there's this way of kind of cleansing and a way of making yourself right with God. It's hard to tell where you are in that system as it's a constant thing. It's a thing that never stops. So it's the epitome of works.
Right, yeah, and that's why Jesus in his own teachings numerous times, right, contrasted his understanding of how we come to be in relationship with God to the Pharisaical view. He emphasized how the sort of Pharisaical view was burdensome, right? That it was a profound burden on the people of Israel to try to practice every single one of these laws and regulations to such a degree that it was a struggle that, as St. Paul would later say, right, would actually teach us that we are not capable of keeping all these laws, right? And so, this practice of observing the law in order to be considered one of God's people, and so therefore, again, merit spending eternity with God, does reflect, and this is something we've discussed in our in men's Bible study, where we've discussed the giving of the law in Exodus, right? This whole system, in a lot of ways, reflects God's accommodation to the ancient Israelites' understanding of the divine and of religion and of how one relates to God, rather than how God is in his own nature.
Yeah, and I love how Paul puts it in Romans, because Romans, if you want a book that lays it out completely why the law is wrong, I think Romans is the one. And he puts it like one of my favorite parts. He puts is, if the law is true, then breaking it once makes circumcision pointless. So like just like that's the level of perfection you need to be at. It doesn't matter how many times you sacrifice and cleanse. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's ultimately futile, right? To justify anyone before God.
Yeah. Then we move on to, I think it's a good one to cover because at least in America it's very prominent, and that's Mormonism, which we've kind of talked about them because they're not Christians. I want y'all to understand that, even though they might say, or they're their full name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But when you really look at their salvific model, all the religions we just talked about, it takes some from them. From a karma system in a way of, based on your works will be how good the afterlife, and you'll get your own planet and become a god yourself.
Right.
To, from Islam, these kind of their own version of pillars. You have to do your, this many years of mission at work.
Right.
You have to do this for the temple. You got to do this. So, and then of course a version of the law itself. So you kind of have this Mormonism taking from all these different places, and the only place they're not really taking from is the gospel itself in a way. I mean, they'll say they do. Yeah. But then everything else says otherwise. So you kind of get this kind of like they're trying to create the ultimate workspace system based on all these other world religions, or at least that's how Joseph Smith wrote it, right? So even because you don't even have to get deep into their theology to realize why it's wrong, just based on that system of combining Islam with Judaism to Hinduism. Like just those three, you can see just from their salvation model, that they're combining these three. If you kind of have an idea, you don't have to be a scholar in these systems, but if you have a general idea of these systems, you can see it plain as day that, oh, that's what they're doing there.
Yeah. And so I think that it's best to think of Mormonism and sort of the LDS as a type of heresy, right? That although there's a effort to identify with historic Christianity, in its actual doctrine and practice is very distinct, right? It's a kind of heretical view of the gospel that we've seen in different forms throughout, right, the last 2,000 years of church history. So it's definitely a departure from the gospel of justification by grace through faith.
Yeah. Which this comes to a good question, because we just talked about the Abrahamic religions. And Michael, because we read the Old Testament. I think it's important for us as Christians to read the Old Testament.
Absolutely.
But why then, what's the point of the law? As a New Testament people, what's the point of it? We still read it. We still study it. We still, some Christians, they really make the Ten Commandments very prominent. We think, if you want to think of the political realm, but we still raise it up. So why? What's the point of this whole thing?
Yeah, and that is a excellent question that I think comes up a lot, because a lot of Christian denominations wrestle with it, because I think a lot of different Christian communities are really not sure how to engage with the Old Testament. I think there's a lot of uncertainty there in what do we take for our, what do we take as relevant for our daily lives versus what is a sort of consigned to, the history of ancient Israel. But in any case, I think it's very helpful to view a lot of the law, as we just said a moment ago, as God's accommodation to the ancient Israelites' understanding of what it would be like to be in relationship with God or with the divine. And so in a lot of ways, these laws are actually very distinct from the comparative laws of the pagan nations, right?
Yeah. Especially the Canaanites, right?
Exactly. And it appears that even in these 613 rigorous laws that are prescribed throughout the Old Testament, God is very deliberately and intentionally, and yet gradually, moving away from this works-oriented understanding of relating to God into what becomes sort of crystallized in the New Testament, right, as salvation through grace. And we can even see glimpses of that in the Old Testament. For example, when God responds to Abraham's profession of faith in him as righteousness, right?
Yeah.
He reckoned Abraham's faith as righteousness, right?
Yeah.
And that's a purely New Testament, that idea comes to fruition in the New Testament, but was already present in the Old Testament.
Yeah. Which I won't follow that train of thought, because that'll be stealing some thunder for later. But I think another good reason why the law is there is it's really a revelation to us of what sin is. That's why I tell my students a lot of times, if that's the purpose there, seeing what's of God and what is not of God. Like that's how we know, like, witchcraft is not of God, because it's playing with blood magic and playing with demons, right? Putting the creation over the creator.
Yes.
Right? And we also see this idea, we see a lot of God's heart, especially with how justice is dealt, of reconciliation and keeping things whole. So, like, I don't think without the law we wouldn't know that heart. I mean, we see it in Jesus, but we see that this has always been God's heart.
That's right.
And there's a lot of beauty in the law if we examine it from a New Testament perspective. Because, we say that Christ is a fulfillment of the law and a realization of everything that's there. Then we can see, Jesus talked about this idea. Like, we get to see all of these things, and only if we study the law with an authentic heart, I think we can see that. Which then, that's why I don't think the Old Testament is useless.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You can see these beauties. Even like for us as a liturgical people, we can see the blueprints to a lot of what we do in Leviticus and kind of how the priests operate. And, we keep some of the imagery of what's done in the tabernacle still to this day. In a way, kind of communion is kind of blueprinted from that. Or at least how we do it. So you can see there's so much beauty in the law. It's not just a set of rules of right and wrong, but it really bleeds to the heart. And then also, something you said earlier, was it lets us know, probably think the main purpose of the law is letting us know is we can't save ourselves, which you said earlier. Like, we can't. It's impossible. That's what God's saying right there. It's like, you guys can try. Good luck. I'll try, I hope for the best, but I'm just letting you know I got something better planned.
Right.
Or I've already had something better planned, if you want to go from that sense. Especially since Bob alluded to in the sermon of, the proto-evangelion, the Genesis 3:15. So, which then that gets us to, Michael.
Yeah.
What determines our eternal destiny is, I think Jesus put it best. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one goes before the Father except through me.
That's right.
I mean, there's a reason why that Bible verse is extremely popular. People get it written on things. There's so much merch. Everything under the sun with that verse is because it is a truth that stands tall.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's somewhat difficult for us to even grasp how monumental a statement that is, right?
Yeah.
That Jesus is making it very clear that humanity's relationship to God is completely determined by their understanding, faith, trust, or lack thereof, right? In Him.
Yeah.
Right? In this one particular specific person who lived, right, in ancient Israel 2,000 years ago. He is sort of the fulcrum, right, in which all of human destiny sort of hinges, right? Yeah. And so that is the distinctive feature in a lot of ways of the Christian faith, is that one is made righteous before God, one is brought into His family, adopted as one of His children, made right a friend of God, a member of God's family, brought into the kingdom of God, destined to spend eternity with Him in the new Jerusalem, right?
Yeah. Through
one's faith in Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
That, in a lot of ways, I think, is the most striking, profound idea in all of human history. This notion that it is Jesus alone who will draw all people to Himself.
Yeah, Loki's just agreeing with that.
Yeah, he's affirming.
The
gospel.
Yeah, just a little inside baseball. Yeah. Michael and I, before we started, we were watching some AI videos about dogs, preaching. Essentially, so it fits the narrative there.
That's right.
No, but it's this is just so it's so changing, and it's so essential. It's our pathway to heaven. Just to make sure, name it and claim it. Not just we're not just talking about like this is this is what gets you to heaven. Or if you want to put it another way, this is what gets you to live in the presence of God.
Exactly.
because we'll talk about later about the new earth, but this is what gets you to that place, is nothing you can do except for having faith in Jesus Christ. Like you said, the trust, because it goes against every fiber of our being. Like, there's nothing I can do. It's like when you're going to someone's house, maybe let's just say Thanksgiving, since that just happened, and they invited you to come, and you're like, can I bring something? Can I help in any way? Can I come early to help set up? And it was just like, no. No. I mean, it's kind of like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, and I think for a lot of us, that's very unsettling.
Oh, for sure.
It goes through all the human systems.
Yeah, I mean, just as you were saying there, that it's completely counterintuitive to the fallen human nature to sort of understand that your fate at this certain fundamental level is not in your hands, right? Yeah. You used the word control, right? At a fundamental level, our eternal destiny is not something that we can control. In fact, rather than something that we can attain through work and effort or obedience to laws, etc., it is a gift, right, that we receive by faith. And that is, to me, in my view, what makes Christianity distinct from every other system of thinking, every other worldview, every other religious philosophy, etc. This notion that your eternal destiny is a gift to be received through faith alone is the distinguishing feature of what it means to believe the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And we see that with a lot of the early heresies, and especially with the Gentiles. Like, it's hard to accept this idea, especially coming from the Jews, the newly created work-based system the Pharisees pushed, to the pagans who are like, I thought we were supposed to have like sex orgies and bring food sacrifices,
right,
and blood, sacrifice my first child, all these different things of like, I thought I was supposed to do all this too, but you're telling me I don't have to do anything. To quote from Talladega Nights, what do I do with my hands? Because that's really it. It's like, what am I supposed to do? I feel like I should be doing something to make this cog in the machine work. So we see that with a lot of the ancient heresies, whether it's the sin more, whether it's who cares about this earthly body, all the fun ones. Or the Judaizers, like, no, we got to implement the circumcision and the laws.
Exactly right. There's this tendency always to kind of regress, right, to those systems of religion that people are that human beings are sort of most naturally comfortable with, most naturally, sort of attuned to. But in every case, right, the gospel calls all those things into question. The gospel supersedes those in every way.
Yeah. Now I want to bring on to another topic, because here's the thing. Because I think it was brought up in men's Bible study when we were talking about Hebrews a couple weeks ago, and the idea that with Jesus coming, he's not bringing us to a new reality, he's bringing us back to an old one. And that is, which Paul prominently speaks on this, especially in Romans, and then the writer of Hebrews, which we know is more than likely a disciple of Paul, so it kind of makes sense. And that is, justification by faith has always been, which that's what you brought up earlier with Abraham.
Yeah.
Abraham's such a great example. He had faith first, and the law wasn't handed to him at that point. But with the faith first, the natural obedience and the heart for God followed.
Yes.
And that's how it's always been.
Yeah, I mean, the basically we can see going from whether it's Genesis 3:15 as you cited to Paul taking up this notion of Abraham's faith as righteousness to the author of Hebrews, we can see there's actually this beautiful continuity through all of Scripture that I believe shows that God is continuously welcoming humanity into relationship with Him in ever greater and more profound ways that culminates of course in Jesus of Nazareth being the incarnation, right, of God to dwell among humanity. But all of these religious experiences of God's people throughout history, going from the garden to the kingdom of Israel all the way to the advent of Christ, right, demonstrate God's love for humanity, His desire for His creatures to come into relationship with Him, to seek Him out, to confidently trust and believe in Him, and to have that intimate and close relationship, to be in communion with Him. That we can see throughout the whole canon of Scripture, right? And so the sort of legalistic system that arose over time is best understood as a corruption of God's most basic loving character, right? Yeah. That in fact becomes a stumbling block for people. It becomes an obstacle for people to come to Him in faith,
or even a god of itself.
Exactly. That's exactly right. An idol, right?
Yeah. And just so we're, because I think we throw out Abraham a lot, and then we never give more examples. So I think just to give a couple more examples, we see this with, if you look at the lineages and the beginning of Genesis, Enoch, he's doing something with God so much so, that God doesn't let him die; He just takes him.
Right.
There's that. And we have Job, of course, that because Job happened around Abraham's time. Like, he didn't have no law, but he was this guy who worshipped God in the midst of sacrifice, and God blessed him because of his heart and his faith towards God.
Exactly.
Then we have Moses had faith first before he brought down the law. Like, even the person we consider, Mr. Law himself, right?
The lawgiver, right?
Yeah, the lawgiver. Like, he had faith first at that bush. And we see his faith develop up to the point, from Aaron being his God's spokesperson till then Moses taking over, then Moses leading him through a sea. Like, we see this faith grow in action with God before the law even comes.
Right, that's exactly right.
So, we have all these great examples, and even when the law is passed down, we still see how faith triumphs over everything. Because it can be even simple things, like Samuel trusting God to bring a king to fruition. Yeah. Even though that's where we have Samuel's rant of why do they need a king, which is still one of my favorite parts of the Bible. Yeah. To how much the prophets, it's not about law, it's about the prophets are putting themselves out there in really hard situations because of their faith and their heart for God. It's not because of the law, it's because of their faith and their heart for God. Yeah. Which I think if we start looking how much that's prominent through a lens, it actually brings the Old Testament even more alive. And actually we see more in common with the early church with these characters as well. That they were doing it the same way.
Yes, most definitely.
So just want to get those out. Sit, friend. Yeah, if your dog's on house arrest, it's a hard time. especially when he's barking into a window. That's never a fun time. So if y'all are hearing it, how loud it is definitely louder in person. Just to give it through. Now, Michael, with all of that, I think it's only fair to give the other end of the spectrum. So what gets you into hell?
Interesting. Yeah.
Because we could just straight up say it's the opposite, but we can also actually go into what does that mean? What's the lifestyle of the individual that is destined for hell?
Yeah. Well, so sort of, a implication, right, of the reality that the gospel is an invitation to come to faith in God and to receive divine grace, to be able to spend eternity in his presence. The sort of, as I said, the implication of that is that the obstacle to spending eternity with God is this rejection of Jesus Christ, right? It's this refusal to acknowledge who he is, what he has accomplished for us, that he was sent of God for our salvation, and to essentially reject him as Lord and Savior. And this is something that we see described, throughout the New Testament writings, that there is a consequence to rejecting Jesus as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, as rejecting the one who came in human flesh, who gave up his life as an offering for sin, right, who poured out his life for our salvation. To reject that, the most profound act of divine love for humanity, that has the consequence, according to, various passages of Scripture, right, of barring one, preventing one from spending eternity in the presence of God. And Jesus teaches this in different ways, and there's even some parables that refer to this, but it is the lack of faith and the emphatic and active rejection of Jesus Christ that leads one to an eternal destiny that is absent of God.
It's kind of like going back to the previous views we were looking at. It's kind of just saying it's trusting in yourself more than you trust God.
Yeah.
Is that a good way of putting it? You're like, I'm good, or maybe that looks too hard. I'm cool with what I'm doing over here, or it's like I don't think any of that's true.
Yeah.
It's a rejection in some. It might not just be a simple rejection of the idea of Jesus. It could be a rejection of what the church is because of some experience you have, or what you've read about. It can be a rejection of what you think works best for yourself. It may not be a direct rejection of Jesus, but it is elevating something of yourself above what God can do.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, because, in a lot of ways, it's sort of a reenactment of the sin of that, from this tradition that we have of this notion that Satan or the devil was, once a, God's chief angel, right, the archangel who falls from grace because of the sin of pride. It's sort of a recapitulation of that same notion that pride in oneself is really antithetical to faith in Christ. You cannot have pride in one's own ability to be the master of your life, to be in control of your life, and at the same time have faith in Jesus Christ for salvation. Those are mutually exclusive, right? Yeah. And so, as you said there, then in that case, one's pride in the self becomes an idol, becomes a god, right? The self as God. And so that is then a decision, a choice at this most fundamental level, this existential level, to reject God and to be a god unto oneself. And I think is another way of saying hell, right?
Yeah.
That is what hell is at a fundamental level, is the elevation of the self in rejection of God.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of putting it. It's yeah, and that's why we get around the idea of who chooses their own eternal destiny. Well, we do, whether it's hell or heaven. We put ourselves wherever that is, based on, are we willing to put our pride down? Are we willing to lay our pride down at the cross?
Right.
And say, we cannot do this. You are Lord. You can do this. Or are we just going to be like, cool, thanks, I'm good, I'm walking this way. So it's ultimately our choice. Because I like to put it this way, because we think we keep on calling it a gift, right?
Yeah.
Which I tell my students this, because when you think of a gift, I give you a gift, Michael. You choose to whether or not receive that gift from me. You can say, like, I don't like you, and throw it in the trash. Or you can say, like, oh, this is lovely, Henry, thank you. Right?
Right.
And then you can also be like, there's another layer of, you can receive the gift, but do I open it, or do I just leave it over there? I've heard about Jesus. So I've kind of, it's in my hands. We'll put it there for right now. You know, so it's this idea that it is our own agency.
Yeah. And, you know, that being said, I'll bring up this allusion to C.S. Lewis, as I always do.
Oh, it's not an episode without C.S. Lewis.
When we talk about hell. But and we can expand on this, actually, even in greater detail when we get to our more episodes focusing on hell. But, you know, in his you know, great work, fictional work on the afterlife called The Great Divorce, right? He describes hell with this key feature. What to him, to his observation, is the most key feature of hell is that the gates of hell are locked from the inside, right?
Yeah.
Not from the outside. They're not being trapped, kept in. They are refusing to come out.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, in a lot of ways, I think, just shatters a lot of these misconceptions about hell that we talked about in our previous episode. But it points to this central idea that the rejection of God is a active choice of the individual to elevate the self over against God.
I think that's a good way to, you know, put a little pin there. Because next week we'll talk about what is heaven, what do we know about heaven. And then, of course, the following week will be the inverse. So we'll get more into these two topics when we get there. Of course, I think the main question with those two is people want to know what it's like.
Yeah.
So we'll look at the biblical examples and everything like that, and share those ideas. But first, we wanted to get out of the way how we get there. So think of next 2 weeks as, okay, we're here now. What is it like? You know. So with that, I've been Henry.
I'm Michael.
And we'll see you next time.